I'm really going to struggle with the ranking of this one in general. I expect to do some videos about the bands I've lost faith in, and Placebo meet that definition, but I think they crossed the line late enough that I can publish this separately. It's not like they're going to hate me anymore for making this video. They hate their fans either way. But I've got to address Placebo because of how awesome an idea they originally were, and just their high amount of very satisfying, rollicking, or kind of unnerving music. Plus, I've probably taken a lot of influence from the way he phrases his vocals. I think I'm going to let myself write more of this in post than usual. Just try and settle some conflicted feelings, especially when I get to that most recent decade. I procrastinated this one. No more Let's Be Brave, Placebo by Placebo. Watch out if you collect CDs, have a look on Discogs and check if the copy has the re-recorded Nancy Boy, because the original studio version is just pretty limp. Also a sweet hidden track. This 10-track album is quite strongly defined by a binary. They've got the things that are their singles and they've got the slowies, and they kind of alternate. Maybe call that poor sequencing? I don't know, maybe that's good sequencing. It's a new musical discipline. They could have been a power trio, but by playing only one guitar string at a time, by having that damn voice, it's a much tinnier proposition, and that brings some urgency and a different kind of depth. Not entirely realized here. Even in the good era, Placebo tended to have at least one dud slow track per album, dud and slow, but it's buoyed by the quality content. That setup has such an individual punkist drive to it. Those odd tunings they started off with, they're not playing by anyone else's rules. Maybe Sonic Youth, but that's hardly rules. Okay, I avoided listening to this one for like a decade because I associate it with bad times. It's possible my perception of this one is stained, but I can't pretend it's anything but a very obvious step up. The band proving they have depth and breadth. Kudos to Mr. Bowie for being recruited to overdub vocal harmony and choosing such a strange melody in a voice that we don't really associate with him. Awesome. There is a lot of power on this one and just evil riffs. I think the singles on this one don't really match up as much. They're more loop-based, and I don't just mean digital loop. There's just less creative content to them. But most of the album tracks are highlights. There is My Sweet Prince, and when you slow it down, it just has boring arpeggios, and it shows his voice and his lyrics in a content that can't make them seem better than they are. But the rest of it really works. Then one of those albums where they go consciously ugly, where they're challenging you to enjoy them less, and you probably will. This is one of those times when we apply the word dark to sound, but most of Placebo is that. Some strange ideas. Rap rock is not a strange idea, but that lowest note in every black-eyed verse vocal is a very strange choice. Why not pick something in tune? By taking some nastier swings, there's some nastier misses, but that also brings nastier hits. My friend Esme made a salient observation at some point that I'm going to slightly misrepresent here. She said that Placebo's USP disappeared when they ended up playing to a click track. Specifically one that refuses them the ability to hurry. I have to make my rock music to a click track because I have no collaborators or biceps. Initial Placebo shows this explosion of energy from how kinda unstable their tempo is. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, go, someone dread a tummy ache. With their move to sequencers, new drummers, 6 band members, no official drummer, they can't access the essential vigor of their early work. Okay, the obvious millennial rock band step of going more synth-based. I think they really pull it off. I don't know if it's just the context in which I was introduced to this one, but it rocks just just as hard, it soothes, the songwriting integrity is up, and it doesn't have a misstep. There's just a gorgeous general sound to it. I wouldn't want this to exist without the 90s Placebo existing first, but we don't have to imagine that. We get both, so we get to love this. I got a copy of this with that covers thing that they've republished a few times as a second disc. It is just thrown together from different sessions over different years. It's not going to stack up as important in the Placebo oeuvre, but running up that hill is. With 10 tracks, a couple that don't work, and a couple that really work, it can go here. Very silly album name and band name combination, and the 2006 era of rock band let's make some singles philosophy that they managed to nail for a strong majority of this. It falls off toward the end, but then picks up for the last track. It's a very deserved and welcome commercial version of the Placebo brand. It's post-emo, and it reclaims and reabsorbs what emo kind of owes to them. The popular bands who got called emo bands got shown how to do it here. Look at B-Sides collection. This doesn't seem to be that well known, this particular publishing. There is a different one. I'm referring to this 2-disc version. But really, no matter how many non-cover Placebo B-Sides you throw together, it's not going to become an important release. With a couple of dodgy tracks reaching most of the album releases thus far, they've got a lot more dodgy tracks, and that explains the majority of this. There's slight value on here. B-Sides aren't the point with this band. I'm so used to pointing out how good a band's B-sides are in this series. They don't have to be. Who'd have thought this guy would be the coolest one in Placebo? I like this next one to the extent that I thought I'd go and get the 2-disc edition, but then after purchasing it, I noticed this was actually an edition with a DVD, not a second CD, and the 2-disc edition looks like this and has a t-shirt in it. I am on less than minimum wage, part-time too. The second disc isn't all that important, but I've stated what I coveted, I suppose. It's alright, I'm not going to count it as an album ranking. It maybe just about counts. There's a couple of reasonable, fun new songs, and these redux versions of existing songs where it's kind of played in a piano mode. But sometimes it kind of doesn't really sound like the song, they're just playing some chords and he's saying the lyrics in a new melody. It's not important, but it's kind of sweet. Oh, it has one of those awful remixes too. I'm not going to call it eligible, but I'm just going to say it's better than a lot of upcoming things. Main album, anyway. I think this can be clearly recognized as a shark jump moment, or at least that obvious rock transition into middle age. They've tuned their guitars, they've got a full band going, and where they used to have relatable lyrics, they're now going on about things like appreciating being alive. As much as that alienates me in concept, this one resonates with me as music. I think it's observable that it's quite similar to the music I make, and I know most of the music I make is after this, but that was already in me as an instinct. Like, I already liked distorting lead piano lines, and they've kind of absorbed just enough Muse influence to become a bit stadium rock without becoming really embarrassing. And they were very open to being embarrassing already. I find this a really refined and powerful rock album, and my ranking is gonna reflect that. So by this point they have really accepted the role of a band who's lasted 15 years, they've got loads more people on stage with them, they've learned to write songs properly, but I don't see that as a compromise in this one, I see that as a different treat. It will soon become a massive compromise. Okay, a little EP shows up here, it's not particularly remarkable, the title track really works, the rest of it doesn't really work, but at least has some promising elements, although when listening to songs, you don't just want to hear isolated promising elements, you want to hear fully realized songs like that first track. What he's going on about here is a bit concerning. So Brian always had a weird approach to grammar, like the structure of a sentence depends on what you can get to rhyme. But now there's appeals to a higher power and Jesus, 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 Jesus. I don't know if he actually has been brainwashed, it's just platitudinous stuff to put in lyrics. I guess post-junkies gotta find hope somewhere. Whatever, these 5 tracks are just about worth hearing, or you could call it one track that's really worth hearing. If the quality of Placebo's content jumped off a cliff, would you follow them? Loud Like Love stinks. It's got nothing of what's good about Placebo, and only momentarily bothers to be a pale imitation of them. It's not even a pale imitation of Soundgarden. It's cookie-cutter, unambitious stadium rock with no features. The band that earned our loyalty did not earn the right to be this incompetent or plain. The most resonant part is the lyric where he pouts about no longer being able to write good songs. It occasionally rises close to mediocrity and frequently chooses to be really embarrassing, as if that would suffice to give the album anything interesting. Like, by being embarrassed by this, I think they've intentionally conned me into having an emotional reaction to it. This EP technically just about counts text on the screen, and the virtue of its content comes from not being songs Placebo are writing in the 2010s. It's inherently disposable, but not something you need to wash your hands after touching. Like, it's fine, but it's barely material. Big hiatus, they came back and he's got a mustache. They're recommitting to making Placebo music, and that's the only thing that makes this any better than the last album. That it's a poor version of Placebo instead of just a poor version of any man's rock music. And this kind of makes it an acceptable version of any man's rock music. Clearly, they've reached a place where I'm not in the audience, and they can carry on, and I don't have to be troubled by that. But I'll still be troubled by it due to the masochism I've chosen. I've re-listened to this one to see if there's anything to say, and nope. Still plenty of music here that's danger, depression, passion, thrill. I think it's worth highlighting the importance of their 20th century character without pretending the albums were complete home runs yet, and noticing that their brilliance crystallized for a bit there before going really moldy. Brian Monco sounds exactly like the worm that sounded like a sheep to Lisa Simpson.
Why does it talk like a lamb?